Welcome back to Man vs. Meeple, the show where we talk about all things board game related. Today we're bringing you a Kickstarter preview. This is for a brand new expansion for Lucky Duck Games' Vikings Gone Wild. It's called Master of Elements, and it changes the gameplay within Vikings Gone Wild quite drastically.
Yeah, pretty significantly. As the name implies, this thing brings in nature and water and fire. And some of the cards have these elements on them so that you're going to try to build your decks maybe to take advantage of some of those synergies.
So if you guys have not played the game before, each of the players at the table are competing Viking hordes, and they're going out there and they're building Viking type things. You're pillaging for gold.
Yep.
You're
attacking each other.
You're getting brew. and what you're doing is you're building these tableaus in front of you of buildings that give you ongoing benefits.
Yeah.
And you're collecting new cards into your hand that, again, give you ongoing benefits. You're trying to gain honor. You're gaining honor from attacking other players. The great thing about this game, if you haven't played this before, and when I say attacking, most people are going to be like, I don't want to be attacked. I like my deck builders to be, a solo experience. When you attack other players, it's very insignificant. You basically check values against theirs, and you get victory points for it.
Right. It's a good way to score lots of victory points, but you don't have to be afraid of being attacked because nothing really happens to you except for giving your opponent a lot of victory points.
Right. So how does this gameplay change from the original game? So we'll talk about what stays the same, and then we'll talk about what changes. So you're still going to have your set base of buildings. You can add buildings from the other two expansions in here if you so wish. We have the starting buildings from just the base game in here. Each player is going to start with a hand of 10 cards. These cards, again, are consistent from the original game. You have things that produce gold. You have things that produce beer. You have things that can attack other players.
Yeah, gold and beer are the main two economies going on here. And the cool thing about these buildings is, in addition to sort of the deck builder mechanic, like Jeremy said, you build a tableau of these buildings out, and they're going to give you sort of additional quantities of those resources to use to buy more cards.
Right. So those will remain the same. The game board is still the same game board, but you have some changes that will happen on the game board itself. Across the top, you have Odin's Path. These are cards you're going to be buying just like any typical deck builder, but there's a ton of new cards that are added in here that are going to change the way that you play the game and the way that you approach the buildings and the building of your deck.
Right.
You have all the typical these are the units that you would typically buy. They're gone. The old ones are out.
Right.
No more. These are all elemental units that you'll be able to buy. Now you have three types of units, as David alluded to. You have fire units, you have water units, and then you have nature units. And there's one different type for each. Now the cool thing about these is that in the old original base game, you typically would have attacking units, then you would have defensive units. You don't have that anymore.
Yeah, they mix it up completely. So there's no defensive specific units. The units both have an offense or a defensive ability. Now, some of them might be better at defense than they are offense, and some vice versa.
Right. The other great thing is, on the bottom, they also give you a bonus ability by spending elemental tokens. We'll get into what that is in just a moment. So there's a lot of more variety in the units in this game than there was in the base game. Here you have all of your divine blessings. There's going to be new divine blessings that are added in. Again, the number of divine blessings is the number of players times 3. So these are trigger points and really, really powerful cards that you will get from scoring very specific locations within the game.
And those go right into your deck just like any other card.
Yep. Across the bottom, you have all of your in-game bonus cards that you can score. There's new ones of these that are going to kind of trigger off of the elemental cards that you've gathered through the game, either through unit cards you've gathered or the way that you're building your structures and the elements that they produce within the game.
Yeah, a lot of the cards in all the different categories come with some new elemental cards, and then some new cards that aren't elemental that just sort of enhance the game a little bit more.
Right. And of course, there's going to be more missions that are going to be added in. Those missions are missions that you're trying to complete once per round to give you victory points. No, that's the base. Now, those are just things that change to the main game board. Master of Elements itself adds a completely new twist upon the game. That's done by the Master of Elements himself. Each player is going to have a 3-card deck that has a level 1 Master, a level 2 Master, and then a level 3 Master. Each player is going to start with a level 1 Master that's placed on their Master of Elements board.
Yeah, there's a new Master of Elements player board that goes alongside your normal player board. He goes right there on the left, and then you're going to have artifact cards that are randomly drafted at the beginning of the game. So you're going to deal out, I think, 4 to everybody, and then goes through a draft. You use 3 of the 4 that you end up with and get rid of the 4th. This is really where the elements come into play big time.
Yeah.
Because these give you basically mechanisms and machines that you can use to sort of convert elemental tokens into beer or gold, or gold into elemental tokens. So you can build some things together with the new aspect of the elements.
Right. So how does that all work? The structure and turn order of the game works in the exact same way. However, at the beginning of every single round during the production phase, each player at the table is allowed to place one of these elemental tokens. Now, these elemental tokens are double-sided, and there's 3 different types that are the same as your fire, your water, and your nature. They're allowed to take any token they wish and place them on any one of their buildings, including their town hall. Once it's been placed there, it's permanent. They can't move that elemental token, and it can be changed in a future round. So at the beginning of every single round, as long as you have more buildings and you're producing and building more buildings, you can place these on there once per round.
Right.
Now, what you're allowed to do at any time during your turn, you're allowed to spin these by turning them over to the other side, or expending them to trigger the abilities on those artifact cards you have. Now, each of these artifact cards has 3 different levels that they can produce. However, those are built into your Master of Elements. If you have a level 1 Master of Element, you can only do a level 1 artifact power. Each artifact can only be used once per turn. So if you have 10 water, you couldn't use all 10 water on one very specific artifact.
Exactly. You can't abuse one card over and over and over, but you can use all 3 of your artifacts in one turn if you have enough elements.
Right.
That's going to take a lot of elements. So over the course of the game, when you're building up your tableau of buildings, which also takes some time, you know, you have to upgrade your town hall in order to expand that tableau. But once you have that, and you have, say, 5, 6, maybe 7 buildings with a lot of elements, it makes for some pretty powerful turns.
Right. And just as the buildings can be upgraded from level 1 all the way to level 3 in the game by expending gold, the Master of Elements can be increased from level 1 to level 3 by spending beer.
Yeah, that's what he likes.
Yeah, that's what he likes. So the gameplay structure is going to work in the exact same way. When you're using these elements, as I said, you're going to flip them over. However, at the end of every round, all those elements will flip back, so you'll be able to use them in concurrent rounds.
Right. Plus, the other thing that's cool about those element tokens, they're going to come into play with much more than just your artifact cards. Some of the end-of-game bonus scoring is related to what buildings you have and what elements you have on those buildings.
Exactly.
There are some cards in the game that trigger off of, you know, if you have 5 of one type, you get something. Or some of the quests are built very much around those sorts of things.
And that's very dependent upon the way you draft at the beginning. You have control over those very first 3 cards that you're going to get. Those artifacts will stay with you for the course of the game. So you're going to be able to decide which elements do I want to use and which ones are needed for my very specific artifacts that I have. Now, also, one other thing to note is that on the bottoms of each of these boards, you can also use those tokens on the buildings to expend 2 of them to get either a beer or a gold, depending upon what element board you have.
Right.
So that's basically the gameplay. Everything else remains the same within the game. You're going to play structurally the same way. It does add more of a gamery, mathematical decisions within the game. You're making a lot of decisions on your turn, not only what you're expending, but all these different powers on your artifacts and how to use them and how to modify your turn in the best way possible.
Yeah, Vikings Gone Wild, even to begin with, was not just your run-of-the-mill straightforward deck building.
No.
It had a fair amount going on with the extra resources and spending those resources along with your cards. This one ramps it up even more with these elements. And the elements, it's all tied together. So you're going to use your elements to affect your beer and your gold, and then use those gold to build more buildings, which are then connected back to your elements as well.
Yeah, and it needs to be noted too that these guys, this is the original base box. We don't have the Master of Elements box yet, but their artwork, the design, the graphic design, this is their best looking product, and it looks fantastic on the table.
Yeah, I love the graphic design on this game for sure.
If you guys have any questions about Master of Elements, ask them in the comments below. We'll get on the forums. We'll have Vince from Lucky Ducks get on the forums as well. Subscribe to us, please. That helps us out a ton. Follow us on Facebook, like us on Twitter. Did I say that backwards? If I did, reverse it. And we will catch you guys next time.
Bye-bye.
Season 2 of Man vs. Meeple is sponsored in part by Cool Stuff Inc. Cool stuff in stock at coolstuffinc.com.